I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. Mark and I started a podcast called Spiritual Bro Book Club in 2022, and during Mars retrograde, actually, which is about to start again. And I wasn't ready, I guess. It was a lot of work. We tried to do a video podcast, so you were having to work for like days to get every episode out. And I was still in like peak self-censoring, filtering, worrying about how I was being perceived, imposter syndrome hell. And so we recorded, I don't know, I think 12 episodes, 15 episodes, something crazy. Because I went to LA and recorded some.
Was it that many?
It was a lot.
It was like 3 or 4.
I dumped several from LA.
Did you release that many?
Released 4.
4, that's what I thought.
One with you, one with P. the Fairy, one with Ramin, and one with Tim Dillon.
Yeah.
And the video, I wouldn't put out the video from... I did one with Dan. I wouldn't put that out. Like, I wouldn't let the conversation go anywhere organically because I was just afraid to get yelled at.
It was hard to be on that podcast with you because I felt like I was being censored. Like,
you were being censored.
It was like...
That's because you were.
Well, yeah, because I mess up words, so I'm
your liability
dangerous.
For you're a liability for someone who has like an irrational fear of being canceled for no reason. Yeah, because the joke of Spiritual Bro Book Club was that the set was set up to look like spiritual bros, which I think they're funny.
Yeah.
And then we were going to have topics about spiritual topics that bros talk about with like it's kind of what this ended up being. I think I was really operating out of my mind, and it was originally supposed to be you and I doing the podcast, and then I got too freaked out that you weren't going to let me censor the fuck out of you. So I was like, well, it's my podcast, but like you can be on it.
Yeah, I was like, fuck this.
In the opening episode, we lived on a decent piece of land at that point. Like your house when we met was like 12 acres. A lot of nature out there. And so you had feathers everywhere that were like found on the land. And so you set up the set to have all these like heady spiritual bro books and everything else. And the opening episode, you're taping a feather onto the microphone to like for the set, which actually looked really cool. But you can see the terror in my face that like we're gonna get in trouble for like cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And I'm like fighting back.
I had to wear the right colors. I couldn't like do anything natural.
The line of like, I really do believe in some of the, like I take these things into consideration, but the witch hunt, like no nuance, out for blood thing that people were doing, like hunting what other people were doing so that they didn't have to deal with their own shadows, you know. I was so afraid of that before I did nervous system work.
Yeah.
I wasn't always afraid of that, but in that window of time, I think brain fog.
And it was a real fear. I mean, there were people, the witch hunt was real, you know, like attacking people for really mundane, irrational things. And I get it, making, you know, the macro point, there were some good points being made across culture. But in general, I feel like a lot of people felt uncomfortable with being their natural selves. They really had to like hypervigilantly edit everything they were saying. Yeah,
I mean, there were people who literally made it their life's work to like find people to quote unquote call out, which is I'm completely against that cop culture. And it, you know, it's a great way to never look at your own shit. But I think that I learned a lot of paradox in that, because I was like, oh, I can both believe this is true and believe the way it's being applied is psychotic.
Right.
You know? So that kind of leads us back to what we were talking about last week, but I don't want to get into that right away because we have several other things happening in the sphere right now. And I can wax anti-government anytime, any day. So we'll get back to like the comment and stuff we were talking about last week in a bit. But anyway, the reason I brought up Spiritual Bro was only 4 episodes ever came out. They were good. I mean, because the guests were great, right? But I cringe a little bit because I can only see my inauthenticity and my fear in that, and then my trying. You know, I just had no business putting out another podcast at that point, but I was still like knocked out of my own power. And but even in that, the set was beautiful. Like the set looked so cool because that was your old studio. You made such a beautiful set. The opening song was a banger, just an absolute banger. And when somebody asked me because I've hidden it, I took it down because I'm not paying to fucking host 4 episodes of a podcast anymore. And then I hid it on YouTube, and I don't know if I'll keep it hidden, but I made it unlisted, and someone reached out and asked about it. And so I was sending them the links to it and just watched the opening of it. And I'm like, no, we can't retire this song after 4 episodes. It's just not right. So I'm pretty sure by the time I put this episode out, I will have opened. We're using that song for this podcast.
We'll put
for a
the
while.
song back on. Yeah. And the video opening was so good too.
Yeah, how it was going into my mouth and then touring around my teeth. People hated it, and I loved that so much.
Yeah, I loved it too. And it was kind of an accident, you know, like we needed some kind of content. So I was looking for old photos of you and trying to like incorporate it and edit something together. And then while I was making it, I was like, oh, what if we just like zoom in on her face? And then I accidentally like keyframed it too much, and it like fully went into your mouth. And then I was like, oh, this is sick, actually. There's so much metaphor in this, like your big mouth, the wisdom that you do, your craft is speaking, and we're, on this excursion into your mouth, into your brain, into your mind just before the podcast. It was like one of those happy accidents that had a lot of really cool metaphor in it. And, I loved that whole opening. A lot of stuff around that podcast was fun. It was the first time we were really doing video. And so like really amping up the set and doing I love that stuff. But yeah, we'll have to slowly bring that into this one.
Yeah, I think I forget what a fucking creative year we had in 2022 because we also made the Abundance course, which was like unnecessarily
aesthetically
creative. Like we put we shot it like it was a fucking feature film when it could have just been like a Zoom call.
No, I love that though. I love making stuff stick out like that. Like most people's courses are like, PowerPoint presentations and kind of very bland, which is oftentimes really good for education. You don't want too many tricks. You just want the knowledge. But I love being able to do it your own way and kind of stick out amongst the mundaneness of that. Take something that's normally mundane and make it unique and weird. I don't know why we didn't come in hot with this one. I guess it was because we just wanted to get the focus of it, the content solid. And then we'll slowly get to video and more tricks, maybe.
Well, I feel like after Spiritual Bro didn't work out, I don't even remember when we gave up on it. I released it right before Mars retrograde, which we're in Mars retrograde now. By the time this podcast comes out, and this is about 2.5 months, I think, of just powering down. It's not a great time to launch something. And so a lot of times it will lose steam during that. This is like a time of reviewing where you're putting your energy or whatever. And so I think what happened is then for the rest of Mars retrograde, I was reviewing the fact that like, I'm not ready to be authentic. I'm not ready to do this. Like, what is even making me do this? Am I just afraid that no one's going to be here to listen by the time I finish learning all these lessons, whatever. And then God, I guess we kind of went from there into move. Oh, that's what happened. We moved. We moved here.
And then we got here and we tried to do another new one. We tried to do Spiritual Bro for a second. And then it was like, no, let's do this new one called The Softening.
Yeah.
We recorded 3 or 4 episodes and never came out.
Kind of had the same glitch. I felt like I needed to retrace my steps. Like, here's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, which is like boring as shit. And then the set was always screwing us up. And I think what was really funny about this, because we did that again with this, was ultimately the set is just our living room on our couch where we would be having these conversations anyway. But we had to try it kind of 50 million different times. And I think we also had to learn how to really work together as a projector and a flail.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that was a fun trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
I like making art with you.
I don't. It's a challenge.
All right. Well, where should we start? Alien invasion?
Yeah, we just made past the benchmark. December 3rd was supposed to be a melee in the sky, Cliff High says. I'm sure a lot of people saw that going around. Cliff High was somebody I started tapping into and listening to every now and then when we were in Nashville still, probably 3 or 4 years ago. But he's a dude that he does these little, I found him on Rumble, I think. He's not even on any of the main apps, but he was always speaking about a lot of conspiracies and had like interesting takes on things. But a lot of what he was known for was he created this thing called WebBot, I think is what it's called. It's an AI program that essentially, it's like a large language learning model kind of thing that basically takes a lot of information from the internet, a lot of things that are being talked about, news and whatever, and puts it into an algorithm that then predicts what is coming.
Based on like pattern recognition?
Based on pattern recognition. It's like, it's advanced AI stuff, but he was, he had the AI going before this Chat GPT thing came out, and he had access to something. Anyways, he had correctly predicted a couple major events. I think the tsunami in, where was that? Is it Thailand?
No, it was in Japan. Fukushima?
No, it was the one that they made a movie about.
Oh, yeah.
That like devastated. I think it was Thailand. It's somewhere in Asia. But he predicted that. There's been a lot of other economic things that this model has predicted. There's been some things that's gotten wrong as well. But he came out a couple weeks ago. I think it was in 2010 where he ran the model and something came up that said, I forget what he calls them, but it's like these markers that are basically high probable events that occur. And if that marker does occur, then there's these string of other events that will follow it most likely. And this event in 2010, it spit out and said that it was that Joe Rogan and Donald Trump would be on a podcast together. And if this marker occurred, then this other thing would follow. And I think at the time he said, he was like, I don't know what this means, Joe Rogan and Donald Trump, because it wasn't, Trump was not running for president at that time. I think Joe Rogan podcast was maybe out, but it was small.
I think he started in 2009 and it was nothing.
Yeah, so it was tiny. And so as we got closer into the election cycle, he started talking again about it. It's like, it looks like we might have this podcast. And so then when it happened, he came out with a new video and was like, okay, so here's what is supposed to happen after this marker. We've had the main marker event. He said 39 days after that podcast, there would be some kind of event in the sky that was our local military having some kind of dogfight in the air with a UAP or some foreign vehicle. There's not like a lot of details on it. It's kind of vague, but that this would be a huge timeline shift in the collective, that on December 3rd was 39 days after, that there would be some activity in the sky. And then it says it's supposed to end in a melee, like an actual fight.
I need to look up melee, because is it specifically the word melee?
Yeah, that's the word he used.
Right, that's a weird.
It was like 39 days to melee. But he then said, December 3rd was around the day, and sometimes these models will get it like in the ballpark. And so he was always saying it might be December 3rd, it could be a week after, it could be a month after. And then he specifically, I just recently saw a video where he was breaking it down a little more and said that the dogfight, something in the like aerial phenomena would be happening. The melee, which would be an actual like our military getting into some kind of conflict with them,
right,
would most probably happen later, a week after or something. And so, I mean, December 3rd, even just the week before yesterday, there has been a large uptick in sightings everywhere across the world.
Yeah, my whole TikTok right now is videos of like...
The other day I saw there was something like 98 sightings in one day of aerial phenomena that had no explanation to it. And then there's a combination, there's things going on right now. I mean, they're calling them drones. Like the news is actually doing a lot of reporting on it, and they're calling them drones, which to me, it was like really quickly just went from UAP to drone. And I feel like drone is more associated with our technology. Like we have really advanced drones doing all kinds of shit. And so I don't know if they're trying to cover that up or they're making it more abstract, but like in New Jersey, there have been these, quote, drones hovering above the city and just hanging there, like for hours on end, and then coming back the next day and doing the same thing. And then I saw this morning that the FBI had been ordered to investigate it, and a lot of the FBI agents that were put on that then started having the drones hovering over their houses. And so even the FBI is like, we're trying to investigate them, but they seem to be investigating us specifically. Again, I don't know if that's a narrative they're pumping, if that's real. I'm questionable because it's the FBI, but
yeah, anything they say, I take it with a grain of salt. Okay, well, so it's December 4th. Wednesday, December 4th. This won't come out until Sunday something. And so this is something that could be really old news by the time Sunday comes if things are changing really fast. Okay, so melee, because that's a really interesting use of, like, in 2024. The general meaning is a confused fight, skirmish, or scuffle, including many people. In gaming context, also interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you ever played Call of Duty? Come on, you don't know what a melee is?
In video games, yeah, I know, but it's interesting language from an AI in 2009. In video games, or 10, it refers to close-range combat, typically involving physical attacks with fists, weapons, or tools.
Elbows.
The word comes from the French term, I'm not going to try to pronounce, meaning mixture or confused fight.
I mean, that sounds about right. What would occur?
Yeah. Okay, so I am so tired. I am like exhausted, tired all day, every day. And I don't know if that's like post-surgery still. I'm only 3 weeks out. Lacey's here. She's also very tired. Every time I try to look into this, I like really can't be bothered. You know, I feel nothing when I'm watching these videos. Absolutely nothing.
I would say that's the general consensus when I'm watching all the videos online. It's still so bizarre to me. We've spent how many years where the like alien community is laughed at and saying, you know, most people are saying aliens are not real, you're crazy. And then now we have the government saying, yeah, they're real, you know, and they're unfolding some all kind of foggy narrative. But the general consensus now is like, yeah, they're real, they're out there. But let me show you my TikTok of me dancing in the fucking bathroom or whatever. There's still like, there's no one
gives a shit.
It hasn't changed anything really. Everybody's just kind of moving on. And when I watch them too, I'm tempted. I want to go down the rabbit hole and like see what's happening, but there's just no reaction and response that is out of the ordinary, essentially. So I don't know if certain people are aware too that this is somewhat of a psyop, and so they're not taking any of it too seriously. They're just kind of waiting for a bigger event or what. But
we're just having so many experiences back to back to back that I am not, that are like unprecedented, that it's hard. Like I feel shy about making a call on it even, because I'm like, yeah, I guess I have to sit with this for a second. But on one hand, the way to manifest things, P the Fairy puts it really well, like it has to be mundane. Like you could magnetize all the resources you need to yourself to be successful in the business or in your art or whatever, but it has to be kind of mundane to you, right? Like when you magnetize to like making it in music, right? Wasn't there kind of it's not as surprising as you think it would be when you're not synced up with that timeline.
Right.
And that's why people say like play the character of the thing you want to experience. And so aliens were not going to show up, or the government was not going to do an alien psyop in the 50s when it would have been such a jump cut in reality that people would have lost their fucking minds. By the time it shows up, human consciousness has met that moment. And so it's going to feel mundane.
Right.
And that's why I always recommend, as far as like timeline jumping or manifesting or whatever, I recommend baby steps, because it's easier to get to that mundane meaning. It just is like, yeah, it makes sense.
You're not attached to the outcome, really.
Yeah, and it's not that exciting, right? Because Like people have the masses have known, not the unconscious masses, but the conscious masses, the people who are paying attention in any way, shape, or form have been like, yeah, duh, aliens exist for a while. And so that's why the idea of it is just slipping into the consciousness. And you have like people who are conscious are like, this is probably a government psyop. And then the people in the world, the unconscious masses are just like, yeah, whatever you tell us, we believe.
Right.
You know? And it's just different than it was 10 years ago, even. Because even 10 years ago, all these things in the sky, everyone would be talking about it.
Right.
And another example of that, because I think what a lot of people are saying is like, yeah, do I still have to pay rent? Which I think is a big part of it, is that people are like much more focused on survival than whatever government psyop lights in the sky. Another example of this is the telepathy tapes that people keep trying to get us to listen to. Did I bring this up on the last episode?
You maybe referenced it for a second.
Yeah. So
we didn't go deep on it.
I got you to listen to a couple of them.
Or listen to two episodes.
So I had ChatGPT give me the gist. I can't listen to podcasts for very long, and I especially can't listen to people scientific materialists who talk like NPR. Basically, they're proving that nonverbal autistics are communicating telepathically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I just feel like, yeah, that's where consciousness is going. I've been saying that for years, and not like I predicted that. It's just like, yeah, we are becoming less scientific materialist. We are becoming less materialist, meaning we are starting to move our consciousness into places that are not physical. And so you will see what will appear to materialists as a degradation of a lot of our physical senses. Our eyes will get worse. Our ears won't be as good. And we will slowly become people who really only talk for the pleasure and art and do most of our communicating via telepathy. And people who are on and this isn't supremacist, as in they're the top now. This is outside of supremacy culture, which is separation culture, separation consciousness. We like people who are neurodivergent are just more wired for that world. And so nonverbal autistic folks are just already there. Like they're just like jumped ahead in the line, and it just doesn't quite make sense to us yet. Well, it makes sense to me. I knew this was coming, but like the materialist, and there's more and more people are going to be neurodivergent. And like, that's why it just bothers some people, it doesn't bother me, but this is why so many people are realizing that they were neurodivergent their whole lives and they were assimilating. It's because they're wired for the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix. They were assimilating to Across the Planning. This doesn't mean that there's something wrong with neurotypical people or whatever. It's just simply in the new world, you would call everyone born, let's say after 2027, would be considered neurodivergent. Because your abilities will match the new game. They won't match the old game. And even people who would have not thought they were neurodivergent before will become that. And that's what everyone thinks, like the phones are ruining you, but they're actually just helping you orient towards that. But anyway, people keep sending me messages about this, like, holy shit. And I'm like, yeah.
It's been there.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's just our community. I mean, the culture needs scientific, valid evidence of it for it to be finally accepted as like real. And that's what I felt was like kind of funny listening to the podcast, because I'm on the same page you are. I was like, yeah, I think there are a lot of people telepathically communicating out there, especially people that might have limitations in other sensory apparatuses, like, and they're come into the world that way. They're going to figure out how to adapt, and some of that might be telepathy, but there's no box for that to fit in from the scientific community. We all think that might be true, but there's not enough evidence, and so they've been doing that forever. It's just the way that they communicate. But I thought it was funny that it didn't, the podcast was kind of doing this like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This kid is telepathically speak. Oh my. and they're, scientifically trying to set up like actual proper like proving it, and even the person that came that was like along to scientifically study it and like stay objective in it himself was like, he came in very doubting and was like, oh my God, this is real. There's nothing I can prove. There's no other way to prove that what is happening is nothing but telepathy. And they're all just so wowed, where I was like, yeah, of course. But
and I don't mean, I just want to say, I think it's sweet and cute that like the consciousness community is getting excited about this.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm like, yeah, duh, is the scientific materialist.
Yeah.
Finding out that something they've been shitting on for fucking decades has been here the whole time. Yeah.
That a lot of people have been talking about. And I think that's what's funny about a lot of this. And it's maybe just the growing pains of we're trying to get the science mentality to adapt to a more magical, mystical world, which a lot of that stuff doesn't adapt to the scientific proving mechanisms. It's sitting outside of that. So you almost can't bring the scientific method to apply to some of those things because they're not following a lot of these strict kind of material rules. And that's even similar to what this thing is. We might get into this podcast on the Danny Jones podcast. He had a guy on, forget the guy's name, but he had been doing some experiments with DMT with lasers and found some coding in the lasers when he was on DMT. And so he goes into this whole thing, but the story was interesting because he's very mystical minded himself, has been experimenting with altered states of consciousness and had this phenomena happen, and then immediately was excited about it and wanted to like bring it to the culture, bring it to society, but realized that like it was going to sound insane and he needed some sort of scientific kind of overlay to it so he could really bring it to intellectuals and academics and have some quality like proof. And the steps he has to go through to do that are like kind of funny too, because he discovered it through like what we'd call synchronicity, and slightly schizophrenic leadings that most scientific communities are not going to take it seriously. I'm like, oh, so you just felt intuitively that you were supposed to go get this laser, and then these numbers showed up on the computer, and then you were supposed to go to Home Depot at that area code and get the and it's like, for me, I'm like, yeah, dude, that's great. Like, you're following the communication from the universe. This is validating it to me. But you can hear how the scientific community is laugh at it, and not take it seriously. And the thing he discovered, it is pretty out there. I mean, it's pretty cool because it's repeatable. And so that's why he's like going the scientific route, because a lot of experiments with altered states of consciousness like are not necessarily repeatable. Each person's experience is going to be different. But he had, hundreds and hundreds of people replicating this experiment, and they're all having the same experience. And so that's why he's like trying to bring it into more of a mainstream thing. But you can already tell it's like it's just going to meet so much resistance because there is a lot of abstract kind of qualities to it.
Yeah, I mean, scientific materialism will have to colonize spirituality. Is the only way. It's going to have to think it discovered it.
And I just don't know. I think the scientific method and everything, it's so powerful. But I do think there's probably some kind of limitations with.
There's 100% limitation.
Studying.
Reality loads according to your bias. Reality loads according to what you are wanting to perceive.
But I'm just curious if science can adapt to it. Like if it opens its algorithm more or something where it can then adapt to that theory of people having completely different experiences based on their consciousness loading the experience. Like, can science, the scientific method, bring those qualities into it to then do valid studies on telepathy, hypnosis, and, astral projection, all these things that the majority of people know to be true, but we don't have any like rigorous science around it. It's all questionable, And so like, does science have to go completely, the scientific method, to prove things, or does it just need to adapt to like a wider array of phenomena?
I think it would have to adapt, but I think the premise is inherently I mean, it's so like the conversation of science and the religion of science that has become like has replaced Christianity. There's so much to that, right? Like science at the core is curiosity, right? And wanting to understand how things work. But the truth about how things work from like an energetic standpoint is that as soon as you establish something, and we have sat in the established things, there's more layers of the onion to peel back, because we never, like, consciousness never wants to stop experiencing. So we will never reach a conclusion that is an absolute conclusion.
And I think that's what the core of the scientific method originally was.
Right.
The science that people are now stating as like trust the science kind of thing.
That's a religion.
Is a religion, and it's based on like hard facts. But if you go back to like the scientific method is about hypothesis always. Like you're always questioning, and then you're trying to add information that like supports the findings, but it really is never getting to the bottom. It's used to probe new ideas and push. But the science that we've now, it's like it's become this rigid thing where it's like, no, this is the only truth.
These are
and
the
we're
established
stopping
facts.
here. We're stagnant here. We're only going to question the things that then have a lot of other facts to them, or we're going to, start questioning the things that are going to benefit us if we can get the answer to. It's become this like perverted thing. So maybe it is just getting back to a question everything always and keep questioning to get more. But
yeah, because like when we're talking about science, are we talking about corporate science? Like my 2 cents on science, this is another thing I wouldn't talk about publicly for years because I was terrified of the scientific materialists.
You scared of those pussies?
I used to be, and I used to be scared of Christians. Like I would be a part of a group, or they would think I was a part of their group. And then I would see all of the like nuances or the contradictions or the hypocrisies, but I wouldn't want to be exiled from the group until I did nervous system work. And so for a long time, I would like keep my thoughts on Christianity, even though I had been a Christian, had thoughts. Same thing with 12-step recovery. It's like, I think it's great, but then I also think there are all these weird dogmatic things when, that don't work for everybody, and all these absolutes actually fuck some people up and whatever. I wouldn't say that for a long time because I didn't want people in 12 steps to be mad at me. And because I was a comedian, most comedians are, or were at the time when I was a comic, are like atheists, and they fucking were bowing to the god of like corporate science. And that, in my observation, scientism became the religion for atheists because people were raised in Christianity or whatever, Mormonism, whatever their parents, religious, whatever. And they wanted to reject that because of the weirdness of it, and because they wanted to feel smarter, whatever. And it was a lot of the dogma, interestingly, the dogma of religion with the policing, sex and gender and whatever. They rejected that, but they wanted the certainty that religion gives you.
Right.
They wanted that certainty. And so then science is like, I will be certainty when I don't understand science to be certainty. But then at the same time, you have corporations who have captured everything, saying everything needs to be done in this double blind, whatever, these studies, which no one can afford to do themselves. And so you're just going to have to take our word for it. And then you have scientists that are good people, but that like the world doesn't work like that when money's involved and power's involved. The world works like you're going to get blacklisted or called crazy. So even the scientists are expected, and the doctors, they're all expected to toe a line, because if you step out, you're going to get excommunicated. And I don't think my fear of being excommunicated is unique. I think most people are operating with a fear of being excommunicated. Like I've talked to doctors who were like, yeah, I'm not going to commit career suicide by speaking out against the pharmaceutical industry. I'm hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, and all of my peers will turn their back on me. So this is, I would say, the shadow side of tribalism, the issue with tribalism. And the issue that I have with what people call science now is that there are studies done that human, like regular people, can't replicate. It's all it's a very corruptible system, like everything else that is corporate or government run.
Yeah.
And so now people call this science, and they use it to dominate each other. And it's also, in a lot of ways, great. In a lot of other ways, it's manipulated to benefit whoever has the money. And then you are like kind of gaslit into ignoring your own senses, because science, which is the new God, which is, it's the same thing. Like, you can't access God without the preacher, the priest, or whatever. You just have to take my word for it. I'm the one that's tapped into God. It's just all cult behavior.
Yeah.
But it's like the socially, I think we're turning away from that, the socially acceptable cult behavior. So if that's what we're talking about with science, no, because it's a manipulated thing being used to dominate. It's a corporate thing. A lot of science is based on material supremacy, which is believing that the material reality is at the top. Right. And it's believing that humans are at the top of the food chain, like this assumption that humans are superior to all the other animals, that animals are superior to the plants, that, if you can't see it, touch it, or taste it, it doesn't exist. It's operating from an assumption that plants are not communicating with each other because they don't have mouths and they don't use words, where in the material spirituality that we're going into, physically talking, material ways of doing things, the physical senses will become the inferior. Not inferior because it's not a supremacy culture, but like the mycelium, we will understand that the mycelium network that the trees have, which is relatively new to mainstream understanding, is the same. Like, we have that energetically with each other. We cord to each other. You and I can have a conversation, and it's actually very clunky to talk with words, because words mean something to me, they mean something different to you. But energetically, we are all corded to each other. But we have to come out of this separation consciousness first to understand that. And you can't come out of separation consciousness while you still believe that you're politically, you're separated, racially, you're separated, gender, you're separated, like whatever, separation consciousness. So the scientific method that is based on things needing to be proven physically is, I don't know how that's ever going to reconcile with an understanding that everything is connected, first of all, and that the matrix loads according to what you're looking at. So if you're looking to prove a hypothesis and you're not truly open and curious, which I think most aren't, if you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars for a scientific study, you more than likely aren't just operating out of tinkering around curiosity in the way that science maybe was hundreds of years ago. You have an agenda, and your agenda loads your reality.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's fun to watch. That part's very fun to watch, the scientific materialist be like, what? This is crazy.
Mind's blown.
But I find for me, I'm just like, yeah. It's fun. I'm not going to say it's not fun to be like, yeah, I said this was going to happen. But and when it comes to the UFOs, I'm trying to figure out why I don't give a shit. And is it because it's fake? Like, what do you feel?
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I'm interested in it. Like, I check every day to see if there's like a new phenomena that is like bigger and more, I don't know, not convincing to me, but like convincing to a collective for everybody to actually be shooken up, because so many wild things have happened and everybody's just kind of going about their day. As I've said before on here, I don't think that there's going to be any kind of disclosure or an event that is on the mass scale that does not have some kind of agenda psyop to it. But depending on like how it goes, how it's played out, it could be more convincing than others, you know, depending on the extremes that that are pulled. The other thing that I'm struggling with is when I'm looking online, and I think this is just a side effect of like us in this time right now with AI and all the advanced technology. There's a lot of it that looks real, but then there's a lot of it that is obviously created. Like digitally, it's not even like a Project Bluebeam thing, like created like that. Like it's just literally videos that people are faking. And I mean, if you have good discernment, you can tell, you know, some of the, like it looks real, it looks natural, looks like it was caught on someone's phone, but then you can just pick up on certain things. There's a video that's been going around that's really trending that is obviously faked because the acting is really bad.
Yeah, you can hear it in the voice of the people that they're faking.
Yeah, and they're saying things that you wouldn't really say in the moment like that. But if you wrote a bad script, you would maybe write that in. And so there's those things happening too, which I don't know, like, is that coming from the deception, the core deception of the elite doing that? Or is that honestly just people that want to jump on the trend and get a bunch of clicks and they create a convincing video? And that's the thing that's just like muddied the water so much to anybody getting an actual clear understanding of what's going on. Is there's just like so much AI and fakeness going on. So I don't know. The thing that I feel like it's probably on the books for us to experience some kind of interaction on a mass scale. It feels like it's going to happen at some point because there's nothing else to do but to get people's attention, to try to shake up people's perceptions and keep people engaged in whatever narrative that they want to roll out to kind of continue to retain people's energy and power. You know, I think the election was a huge attempt at that, but then it seems like the election went the direction that they didn't want it to go. People are autonomizing quicker and quicker. People are becoming independent on TikTok and being able to make money, and we're all connecting. It's like, if this just keeps going, people are going to like exit the matrix. And so what attempts would they make to stop that? You know, I think it's some psyop invasion. It's another pandemic, or some kind of, you know, the war thing, a comet.
Dude, if they fucking stage an alien invasion and no one gives a shit, I am grinning from ear to ear right now. Like that will warm my fucking cold heart. So,
well, and it's just hard to think about, like, what?
God, I would love that. Just people are just like, shut up.
Yeah. But, and I mean, we're kind of already there.
Yeah.
Like there's so much wild shit and nobody's really saying much, but I'm curious what would have to occur that would get people's attentions. Like,
you could never get everyone on the same page again.
Yeah, I don't think so. But like we're seeing craft of all different types. Some of them are like interacting. People are shining lasers and they're shining stuff back. So we're already at like a pretty crazy level. Is it going to take literally like a UFO landing and we see the being walk out and we see a human interact with them for us all to be like, okay, hold on, what the fuck? And so it gets on everybody's feeds and it's on the news and everything. Like, what level does it have to go to for it to be like, there's an alien invasion or there's an alien interaction and now it's completely undeniable? Like, I don't know what that is and like how they would play that out. Is it going to look like a ton of them all showing up to one city and they don't have to get out? Or is it going to be a dogfight in the air with military and then the military craft gets shot down and now there's a reason to go to war with these beings because they're bad and you align everybody that way? Like, what is the event that is going to be so drastic that makes people like all click into being on the same page. I just don't know what that is.
It doesn't exist. It's too late. You know, I think, and I can only speculate on this because I wasn't alive at that point, but the way that they present the 50s or whenever the moon landing was, you know, you controlled the masses. They all read the same newspapers. They all had the same couple of TV stations.
It's much easier.
Much, much easier. They didn't have access. People in the United States did not have access to what was happening in other countries. So you could just tell them, man, they're all crazy over there. We need to bomb them. And the people in the United States would be like, yeah, you know. And I'm sure there was like racial divides in the United States, but the racial divide did not have the internet to allow the sides to communicate with each other. Like the information, the narrative was a completely under lock and key with the way that the media existed at that point, and no internet. Like, I don't think people understand like what the internet did to human consciousness and the way that we can now communicate with people in the Middle East who, you know, our parents' generation, the generation before that, were just fed lies. And unless they got drafted and went over to war and came back and said things aren't the way that the government has said it was, and then they got blacklisted and they got kicked out and then treated really horribly and treated like crazy or whatever. Like the access to information and the access to other people's perspectives has really changed and ultimately like divided the mainstream in a way that like won't go back. So an alien could walk off a craft and the government could say the alien said this and here's what we need to do. And if that would have happened 75 years ago, I can't believe 1950 was 75 years ago, I think you would have had the vast majority of the United States believing that.
Right.
That one fucking singular narrative. Even 9/11, it was very controversial for a long time, left and right. I mean, there were definitely some people on the left that were against invading Iraq, which, like, yeah, it was insane. Like, connecting those two was insane. But really, to even say we shouldn't invade Iraq, for years, people were so hypnotized by the media saying terrorist every fucking 5 seconds that if you were to, like, because I did say, like, this is the government, like, he's smiling when he's like, he's so obviously fucking lying. George Bush is so obvious, like, how can people not see? He grins after everything he says. And people were so hypnotized and, like, irate that, like, you hate America, you don't care about the people who died. You know, for a long time, you couldn't question anything because otherwise you hated the troops. Like, I think that people don't remember the propaganda, you know, or the way when people were kneeling at football games, they had everyone convinced that that means that they aren't supporting the troops. I'm like, what the fuck does that have to do with kneeling at? What the fuck does a song at a football game have to do with the troops? And what do the troops have to do with the fucking military industrial complex, you know? And so all of these things people understand now in some way or another, and they're all divided across it. So there just is no unifying event. COVID was the last straw of everybody going in their own directions.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good thing. This is just a thought I had while you were talking. I had it last night and I was like in a tired slump going to bed, and I kind of forgot about it until just now. But, you know, here's another option. I'm always fascinated with the idea of multidimensional realities that you obviously can experience in altered states. But thinking about, I'm always trying to figure out, like, so we're in this third dimensional reality. If there was a being in a fourth dimension or another dimension trying to communicate, like, how would we experience that? There's obviously many different paranormal phenomena and alien abduction scenarios that people tell stories, and we kind of get a glimpse of what it would be like. It seems to be combined with time dilation, so you, like, are kind of removed from time. The experience is always very etheric. It's like sometimes material, like a paranormal thing, but it seems to definitely be tied into your consciousness. So whatever you're projecting, it's gonna play as. But then it also, it can like biolocate like very quickly. So what is that other dimension? And this alien phenomena, if that is part of another dimension, or beings that are multidimensional and they're traveling in and out of dimensions, I think of it like this: like when so I'm just basically trying to paint another picture of this not being a psyop, part of it being a psyop, but also us getting to a certain evolution in consciousness where we're now ready to understand the multidimensional level.
Yeah.
And how do we begin that exploration? You would think they would slowly start to make it more regular and slowly get it to be something that is kind of mundane. And then we would naturally get used to it. And then before you know it, we're just kind of easing into 0 point energy. And, you can get in these craft and like move through a different dimension. And we understand that that's like local. It isn't far out there, And so I think of it to try to understand the like dimensional thing. I feel like you can always just look like macro to micro. So we can look in our lives, how we interact with the 2-dimensional world, and try to conceive what those beings are, how they're experiencing us. So like if you have an ant farm and it's, a huge container that you've created that has a natural landscape. It's got sand. It's got like little leaves and stuff in there. And you just have that sitting there. The colony gets going. They make a nest. They're living there. And every now and then you come and look over the thing and, move some leaves. You clean it up or whatever. You're feeding them. Or you just want to like mess with them. So you have like a pencil or something and you put it down into their world and poke one of them or move them around. To us, it's very natural. It's like we can see their environment. We're there. It feels like they are in our dimension. But for the ant, that perception, it can't conceive that it is in a world within a world.
Yeah.
Its own little container is its world that it knows. But every so often, there's this giant pointy wood thing that comes down and like taps it aside or moves these huge leaves around. And it just experiences a phenomena and has no box to put it in. It doesn't know that's a pencil. It doesn't know that it's a human doing it.
Or why it's doing it.
Or why, what the hell is going on. And so I was watching one video last night where it was just like a UFO that had 3 lights, like a triangle thing. I think it actually was a fake video. But I just for a moment was like, seeing it as a huge being. We're in the ant container and there's a huge being taking this little light pointer thing and like moving it around and getting us all to go, oh my God, I see it. I see the thing, And then it just pulls it out. And it's just like almost experimenting, trying to go, okay, so they're starting to become aware. They can't actually see the phenomena. Because the other thing about the UFO stuff is like there are some people that can be in the same location, look up in the sky. 3 people will see the UFO and 3 people will be right there and they don't see the UFO.
Yeah.
And that feels like it's tied to like your ability to hold that is in your reality and not lose your shit. So if you believe that they're there, like then you're going to see them. And so it feels like it's this almost like this learning process, like whatever the other beings are in the other dimension that I'm going to say is like good and bad. There are probably nefarious ones and ones that are just wanting to stay out of the way. I forget what I was saying, but how is that going to unfold in this reality? It feels like we are at that point to open up to like that multidimensional reality, how we evolve to it in a balanced way. these phenomena, like, and these interactions could be that slowly trying to get us used to it. And then in 10 years, UFOs are just flying around normally, and people are jumping in them to go to a different dimension, a different place to hang out, but they come back here. Or once that happens, I think maybe that is we flip into a new dimension. Then we're just in the fourth dimension. It doesn't necessarily look that much different, but the capability of moving out of time and everything is now possible, and so those alien ships no longer look like pencils coming down some foreign object. It's a regular thing.
We understand
the ant understands it's a world within a world, and there are these other beings that they can interact with,
Yeah. I think that's the thing that's confusing for me. Not confusing, but it's the thing I'm trying to figure out, like, because that doesn't feel off the table for me at all. Like, I do believe that there are what we're experiencing as crafts. I think they're more beings, because I think we still in separation consciousness think that there are beings and then there are things. And you are someone that has like that animus thing, so you understand that everything is a being. I think that as our consciousness increases, we start to see these craft beings coming into, that's why a camera can never catch them good, because our consciousness is moving into fourth density. And so we're starting to be able to perceive aspects of reality that we couldn't perceive before. I believe that there are 8D beings among us in this room right now, and you can only see them on psychedelics or when you hit certain points where you're at that frequency. So that totally feels true to me. And it also totally feels true to me that we will have a mundane, like, our consciousness will keep getting higher to where these things are not surprising. And then it's because we're moving into it. And then before you know it, we're the ones on the ships, and the people still in the third density will experience us as the pencil. That all totally resonates. And that's why I'm kind of just like, I'm trying to just feel it and ask other people whose spleen I trust or whose intuition I trust, like, I'm trying to figure out what I feel about it. And it's like, well, I am very tired. And so my lack of sacral engagement with these videos, I don't have a lot of mental thoughts about it. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out. And then I'm weighing that against like the telepathy tapes, which I'm like, yes, that's very true. But I'm also not having a huge reaction to that. But I'm kind of not having a huge reaction to that because that is mundane to me at this point. I would have freaked the fuck out about the telepathy tapes, 10 years ago. But I feel like it's very obvious to me how close we are to telepathy, and it's feeling less and less magic woo-woo and more just like, oh yeah, it's just a part we forgot. So I'm trying to discern, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because I sent you a bunch of those videos. A bunch of those are fake, and I think that that's why it's not doing much for me. And then I think also, if you and I are standing outside, and this has shifted in a few years even, if you and I are standing outside and those lights start communicating with us, I don't even know how like excited, it's hard to say because I think I'm like physically kind of in a depressed state right now, but it's hard. It is mundane, I think. So that's going to make it even, like, I don't want to take the fact that it feels mundane and just assume psyop, because that's also a really boring way to live, right? And I don't even necessarily think like U.S. government psyop. I think it's more like there is a mass exodus from the matrix right now. Like an enormous amount of people are exiting the matrix of the mind. And so when we're talking about trying to get everyone on the same page and back into the fear and the division, that's all just like whatever service to self entities, they're like losing control of the aquarium where they get their loosh or whatever. That's more what I'm talking about, like mass fear events or like mass comfort event, like whatever to try to, I just don't think any of that's really working. I think people are just waking up so fast.
Yeah.
So I'm at a hard I don't know. It will really depend on if it centralizes, if the narrative centralizes. Like if the government's like, hey, we got it under control, we know what's happening, then I will be like PSYOP. But if it's just like individuals having experiences, then I'm like, maybe it's 4D.
Yeah. It definitely feels like to me both things are occurring. Like we're supposed to be evolving into a place where technology becomes wildly enhanced that then allows us to enhance our own physiology, our own technology that has been dormant forever. But there's also, like on one level, I like to think about this multidimensional reality where there are other beings in this room right now. They're just in a slightly different frequency, so I can't see them. Which means there could be like full utopia civilizations occurring right now, but it's literally in a different frequency. So it's local, but it is not local, if that makes sense. But then, and I think that's always occurring. You only start to cross over and see those things when you get closer to those frequencies, either temporarily or permanently. But the idea that there's a whole nother world going on right now is so fascinating, and like I'm just so curious about that, like endlessly. But the other thing I'm also like, it makes me curious and like I wonder about a lot is I just fully believe, like through reading a lot of stuff and just feeling into it, that somebody somewhere, like whether that's the government, the corporate overarching control system or what, has had that technology for a while and they've been using it for their own good. And at some point there was going to be, we were all going to figure that out, or we were going to evolve to a point where like now everyone is supposed to be open to this idea. And so knowing that they've had it like literally since the 60s, 50s, 40s or 50s even, like there have been groups of people that have had it. And what have they been doing with it the whole time? And did they know that this event was coming and they've been, the entire time trying to change the timeline to get it to not happen so they could keep the secret forever? But with that in mind, like, I just think that, like, fully believing that and knowing that they've had that for that long, that when we come to this point where people are starting to figure out and see other beings in these ships, that then they are going to have to try to quickly cover everything up and control it, or use their own craft and present as the aliens, right? Like that would be the PSYOP, is that it's just them, or they're in factions with other powerful beings that don't have our best interests in mind, and so it's them, but it's all orchestrated via just fucking humans that are here. And that always, it's like, it blows my mind to think of that, like that there literally could be another person that's just able to jump in a 0-point energy vehicle right now and travel anywhere.
Yeah.
And like we're just sitting here in our house thinking that we're stuck in this one location. And yeah, I can go to Japan, but it's going to be a 16-hour trip. It's going to be all this like stuff that I have to go through. And knowing that there's just technology right now, you could literally get in a UFO and go fucking anywhere, is crazy. It just makes you really feel like you are actually in a jail. Like, why can I not do that? And just the idea that knowing that people are doing it right now, is crazy to me. And it makes me just feel, it's just so open-ended, like reality in itself. I'm so curious about how we transition into that reality, because I know it to be true. It's just about having the awareness and the consciousness that can hold that idea, and then also the tech. I think that helps us kind of transition into it. But if there was somebody that wanted to keep that secret and not allow everybody to have that, like, what would they do? What could they do? How far could you push the illusion to prevent that from coming out when it's just like so naturally on the books as far as our technological evolution and how quickly it's moving? it's here, you know?
Yeah, I don't know about the tech piece of it, but from like a consciousness perspective, I think if you keep people from understanding the mechanics of reality, i.e., like you keep people from understanding that the matrix exists in your mind, it's not a physical thing outside of you. It is a control system in the like reality is algorithmic. And so whatever you're looking at is what loads in the reality. And so by super traumatizing people as children, then the things that they're programmed to look for are limitation, lack, pain, suffering. Like, you know, we're conditioned from a very young age to operate in a jail cell. And the jail cell exists in your own programming. And the jail cell exists in your own bias and prejudices. And then also not letting people, like never teaching people how projection works. And so people will continue to project out everything that's inside of them. And so then they never get to what's inside of them that is creating the cells in their reality. Like every single person has reality creation inside of them. And so they are experiencing the reality that they've been programmed to experience. Right. And so you just keep people trapped in the matrix. You don't really have to do a lot. And then you just keep, and when it seems like they're starting to get out or they're starting to talk to each other or they're starting to like become introspective, you just add more division, really. You just add more reasons for them to project. I think ultimately, if you don't understand that the experiences you are having with other people are about your internal experience, and you are projecting them onto a screen of others, you will spend the rest of your life shadowboxing others rather than getting in there and getting control of that, getting command, I like better, of the projector so that you can project a reality that you want for yourself that ultimately benefits everybody. And so, yeah, that part I'm just like still kind of confused about. Like, I just don't think it's just technological. I think that we can't reach the point, I believe, that we can't reach the point of that technology if we don't understand the mechanics of reality. And that much of the mechanics of reality are encrypted from your average person because you have to like wake up. Like you have to, you know. And so I just don't know. I don't understand because I really can only understand things if I have like I'm able to recognize the pattern in actual fucking reality. So,
I agree. I think that there's almost like a requirement to understand the mechanics of your own internal reality. That's the main commander of your experience. To be able to, you know, potentially time travel around time and not fuck things up, because it seems to be a very sensitive kind of matrix in a sense. And if you're moving about, you know, like as Jason Giorgiani says, you can't have Tim, Dick, and Harry running around in a time vehicle messing with the reality.
Right.
So you would have to be some kind of consciously evolved enough to do that. But the tech to me is an integral part of getting through the transitions. Like I don't think we necessarily would always need a UFO to time travel. You know, you can eventually do it with your consciousness and your own vehicle, your own body.
Yeah.
Exit bodies and come in and out and being able to remember. But, you know, like I just look in the light, it's on a reality, the way that tech is such an influential thing. Tech gets, you know, started from the imagination, an idea, and somebody invents the tech, and then the possibilities open up in the reality. You know, the computer got invented that eventually led to the internet, and then like we now have a slew of new experiences to experience because that technology was brought to market and we could use it.
Right.
And then all of this other stuff that's like almost unpredictable occurs. And so the tech feels like it's a part of it for sure, and it's a part of helping it may be a part of helping us remember certain technological things that are within our physiology, like telepathy and levitation, anything that's like, you know, there's in history, there are stories of people having those qualities before. So I feel like that's where, you know, the tech and the consciousness, like they definitely intertwine in some way.
Yeah, and I'm not diminishing the role of the tech. I just think, you know, for someone who's like a hyper materialist and believes that their version of events is the version of events, people that believe in objective truth and linear time, I don't know how they coexist in a reality where you can time travel.
Yeah, I don't think you can really.
Because, and that's why I keep harping on, there is a stalemate for a lot of people in their consciousness journey where they're not able to hold paradox. If you're not able to hold, this is who Donald Trump is to me, I'm going to use him as an example because he's everyone's favorite polarizing example. And this is who Donald Trump is to himself. This is what I believe him to be. This is what he believes himself to be. And this is how other people are experiencing him. If you can't get curious enough to do that because you believe that your version of it is the capital T truth, there is a ceiling to where you can go in consciousness, because in order to move about the cabin outside of the matrix, you have to be able to understand the mechanics of reality. And the way that the mechanics of reality goes is that I am living in a movie. You are living in a movie. In some ways, our movie is compatible. You're playing a role in my movie. I'm playing a role in your movie. But I can never truly know the role that you're playing, that you, the what it is to be in your movie.
The way I see myself.
Yeah. Right. And so I have to be very open-minded and open-hearted, especially when I'm triggered with you or something, to remember that, like, the narratives that I'm casting on you, even just as my partner or as a relative or as a friend, are not the narratives that you are living in. And that my narratives are mine, they're not yours. And that you are existing in something else that is happening at the same time, that we are individuals inside of a thing. And so to understand that that is multidimensionality right there. But when we go, no, my reality is the reality, and I will tell you, stranger I've never met, what your intentions are, and I will tell you why you do the things that you do. You are locked in the matrix, and you will never be able to understand the true nature of reality because you believe that your movie is the movie. You can have, like, but you have to be able to hold both. You have to be able to go, I'm experiencing this, but you're playing a movie where you're fighting the man or whatever. And I can look at you and go, oh, you're subconsciously actually just doing this. And that's fine. Those two things can exist at the same time. But if we can't hold multidimensionality, and we also can't understand that, like, my memories of things are because of the movie that I'm playing in, they are not the capital T truth. You and I could have had two totally different experiences. This is why when you break up with someone, people have two completely different stories. It's not because one person's a liar. It's because they were living in two often not compatible movies. So I just think if people can't hold the paradox of two perspectives, then they're definitely not ready to understand that time isn't even actually real.
Yeah.
And that linear thing that we experience every day, because the time thing fucks me up. The linear thing that we're experiencing every day is ultimately a story that we're piecing together, but it's not actually real. So in order to travel outside of that, our and it feels like we're very close, but like our consciousness has to reach a certain point.
Yeah, because if you just even imagine for a second, like, the implications that come with time not being linear, it's the most, like, floaty, weird, bizarre feeling.
Yeah.
You can't feel grounded. Like, everything we experience and know is based on, there was something that happened yesterday, there's something happening now, and there's going to be something that happens tomorrow, and that's it. Like, but if all of a sudden I'm traveling back 10 years and I pop in and I experience the reality in a very real way, and then I can jump back and come here and then feel the effects, you start to go like, what is reality? Where's my home? Where you feel alone, you feel floaty. You know, it's like I've done that before. I've really just like sat and imagined it and tried to play it out, and I feel trippy at the end of just a thinking experiment. So to actually do that, yeah, you would have to be able to hold paradox. You'd have to understand yourself fully and somewhat the mechanics of the reality and the way it works for you to even not lose your marbles when you do it, you know, let alone actually mess up your life or whatever, you know. It starts to become, so I think it's like these thresholds are somewhat initiatory, you know. I don't think everybody gets to just fucking be handed a time machine. It's something that like you naturally evolve into, and it does become kind of a very, I would think, somewhat of a smooth transition into it, and it is somewhat mundane pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Not mundane, I think it's still like there's so many more experiences to have. So it'll be like when you first start driving a car. When I turned 16, I was like, I am a free man. I can do anything and everything. I will drive everywhere. I will drive to get groceries. I will, you know, I love this. And then in a year, I'm like, it's like a chore to drive, you know?
Right. I guess mundane just as like not so extraordinary, it wouldn't exist in the timeline, you know? I'm really tired. I'm just like annoyingly tired.
Said that a couple times.
So I don't even know if I have the energy to get into. Did you have anything else you want to talk about? The UFOs or the time travel or the DMT guy?
No, I don't think so. The DMT thing's cool. I mean, if you haven't checked it out on the Dana Jones podcast, essentially this guy just was using DMT pretty regularly to try to learn and understand stuff. And he, at some point, had a laser in his room. He may have gotten like a message to do it, but he had interactions where he essentially was doing it enough that he then started to get pretty used to it, the experience, and he had full-on beings come in the room and sit down and like talk to him. And so it became this kind of other reality he could just go to. And I think the interaction with one of these beings told him to get the laser. But he shined a laser in the room, like at a wall, and he said you could see, if you like looked closely at the laser, you could look in and see matrix code. He said it looked like almost like Japanese writing. It was not Japanese, but it's like some other language. But matrix coding, like the movie. But he said it's like you're actually looking into another dimension. It wasn't like a hallucination. It's like you're looking into another space that is all code. And so his stories about it are really fascinating. He repeated it with, I think, 100, 200 people, that a lot of them blind, like not knowing what was going to occur.
They were looking for, yeah.
Yeah, and they all reported the same phenomena. So again, to me, it was like, oh, yeah, this is a cool discovery as far as him being able to make it tactile and repeatable and kind of go, this is real. But I think anybody that's had a DMT experience would go, there's matrix code in there. It's another dimension. You know, I don't know what we do with this.
Yeah. I do love that science, though. I love a guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A guy just on DMT figure. That's what I think the new stuff will come. It's going to be crowd sourcing.
Well, and that's what he
science.
talks about. Like he's been trying to kind of bring it into a bigger field, but he's being blockaded everywhere. One, for people going, I don't know what to do with this. This isn't scientific study.
Ugh.
And then he tries to like set things up like that. But then people are also saying, we would have to do some other tests and we need a lot of funding.
I just like, stop taking
millions of dollars. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I wish we would just stop thinking that way.
Yeah.
Is like, I don't want to talk about it too much because I maybe won't do it, but I maybe won't do it anyway. But I'm working on a book. And I've been working on it. This is the 50th time I said I was working on a book, so don't hold your breath. But I'm like immediately like, okay, then how do I publish it myself and how do I promote it myself? Like, just the sooner we stop needing the consensus system. We have the fucking internet. You have TikTok, you have podcasts. These things have a greater reach. You know, it's just fucking replicated ourselves on the fucking internet.
Yeah,
Talk about it ourselves on the internet. We're just still like so conditioned to need it, things fucking validated by the system.
He seems to kind of be going that way because he's making a movie about it. And again, I don't really know what the end goal is, you know, for him to discover that. And then I guess it just validates that there is, we do live in somewhat of a digital, you could call it digital world, but it's like an electronic universe. And so here he's seeing the core coding in it, you know. Maybe that trail, if you follow it down, if it's a proven fact, there's some kind of amazing discovery through it. But I think a lot of people understand that we're in an electric universe, and very much, you know, you control your own reality, but there is some beings or something that created the Matrix, created the fabric of it, and there's a bunch of tricks and dead ends, and it's like a labyrinth. And so I guess, you know, having that realization is one thing. Then what to do about it is like, how do you hack your way out? Do you need to get out? Are we supposed to get out? Are we supposed to be awake? Are we supposed, you know?
Yeah.
All of that is all just like very individual. And so I don't know it's a cool experiment. I think it's a really cool podcast. And I liked the guy's view on what reality is. It was a very interesting kind of electric DMT take that I resonated with a lot. But
do we know his name? Because we're just going to get 50 comments asking his name.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Let me look it up because I have it here.
And I'm going to look up the comments.
Danny Goller. And it's on the Danny Jones podcast. The episode is called New DMT Experiment Finds Alien Code Hidden in the Fabric of Reality. I don't remember if there's anything else I wanted to say. There was nothing more on the UFO stuff, but you sent me, we had notes in here. Scientific shifts towards magic, telepathic plants.
Yeah.
Did you want to get into your comment stuff again or no?
Yeah.
Is this a good podcast?
I think so. This is why we record them on Wednesday, so that if they're not, I just think I'm kind of low energy. You're doing really good.
I get tired like in the end of the day, like 6 or 7, oddly. I go through 2 hours of like, I should go to sleep, and then I get wide awake again.
I think I'm just like still recovering from surgery, and I'm like immediately trying to go back to doing stuff. And it's just like, I can use my arms now, but I am still, a lot of my body's resources are being used to heal some pretty gnarly incisions, you know?
Yeah.
So my lymph was cut, and so my lymph has to find each other. My nerves have to find each other. I'm also still just kind of swimming upstream of perimenopause. So I think I think I knew a year ago that this was going to be a significant Mars retrograde for me. The combination of like winter. So I think I'm just really tired. I think
if an alien craft showed up in our back lawn, would you still be tired?
That's what I mean. Is I'm like, I really can't tell.
You just be like,
I really can't tell.
Mark, I'll see you later.
I can't tell if my apathy is just purely exhaustion. That's why I keep mentioning it. I'm like, yeah, it's been a very long time since I rescheduled content because I was tired. It was like Lyme disease was the last time I did that. And I've rescheduled a live reading for the last 2 days. I'm literally like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So I think I'm just, the recovery from the surgery is pretty significant, I think. And I think I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off for 2 months beforehand. And my body's like, no, I just want to rest.
Now you're running around like a chicken with its arms cut off.
Okay, so I just want to circle back to stuff we talked about last week. I have
Can I pee?
Okay. All right. Post bathroom break. Circling back to last week's conversation. The first thing I want to say, and I really want to get better at saying this when we have conversations about comments. I want to get better at saying this in the moment. Because it's like, obviously, if you're leaving a comment on the podcast, you listen to the podcast, you're not an enemy. A lot of times I read a comment, and if you're on the Patreon, you know, like my reading comprehension's not great. I really rely a lot on hearing the tone of people's voices or being able to see their body language. And so a lot of times I'm not even understanding what the person is saying. And I'm usually using a comment or when I do Q&As on Patreon, I'm usually using that to bounce off of something that I've seen more epidemically on the internet. And so I did not take the comment that we talked about last week. I didn't take offense to that. And I thought we said we didn't really fully understand what the person was saying, but just to like clarify, I was not trying to attack that person at all. I was not triggered by that comment really at all. Just
using it as a jump off point.
Kind of using it as a jump off. And there were a couple things I didn't know. Like I didn't know what the millionaire thing meant. So I just was like saying we're not millionaires. I didn't know if that's what the person meant. But
yeah, I didn't think they meant that actually.
Yeah, it just was kind of random in there. I think looking back at it, it seems like maybe they were commenting as the episode went on. And so I really kind of used that. We didn't really even get into most of it, but I kind of use that as a jumping off point for a conversation that's larger on the internet about privilege, and where I think that privilege is a great conversation if we're talking about the system. I don't think I don't think the way that it's often used on the internet, not necessarily by this person, is helpful in any way, shape, or form, because it's dehumanizing, and it's painting people with a broad brush, which is how the system operates. And it's kind of dehumanizing, and it just kind of takes away your individual experiences. And that's why a lot of people write off this entire concept as quote unquote woke shit or whatever. Like they're not even interested in getting into the intricacies of other people's experiences because they feel dismissed. So when you present this idea to, like, let's say a white man who has struggled his whole life, struggled upstream of illness, mental illness, poverty, whatever, and you tell them that he's privileged, when you use it that way, there are people who have capacity to get curious about that, and then there are a lot of people who just don't have capacity. You're just telling them they're bad. And if you're really like seeing people as individuals who are complicated and who have their own programming and their own, like if you're actually applying compassion, I'm not talking about this comment, we as a collective are actually applying compassion to everyone and not just people that we deem worthy through our purity filter or our oppression fucking hierarchy or whatever, then we would see why a lot of people can't interact with that idea, because the nuance is being taken out of it and you're painting people with a broad brush that they don't identify with. So in my personal experience, I just shared a couple of things that while I do systemically I can do an hour right now on why systemically the system is set up to. Now, this is being dismantled already, but the system that we were all born and raised in is absolutely, yes, was the white men were at the top, and then white women, and then there are many, many people who existed outside of that structure, though. There are many exceptions to those rules, but that is the way that the system was set up. The issue that I have with the conversation around it with people who also believe in the system, it's like, okay, so you want to talk about systemic racism? Let's talk about how the feds brought crack cocaine into Black communities and absolutely decimated their communities. And then how the system used the media that was promoted. So they promoted less and less conscious rap and more like rap promoting violence and drugs and everything else. And then used that media to fill up the private prisons. Like, the private prisons are inherently a part of the justice system. Like, that's all rigged, and it's all rigged to disproportionately hurt Black and brown people. So this is why the feds that did that to the Black community are the same feds that you're cheering for going after Donald Trump.
Right.
That's my issue with it. That's my issue with these conversations. That's what 2 podcasts ago I was ranting about, is it's a privileged person living in the suburbs didn't do that. The system did that. And so the answer is to divest from the system in any way as possible, even if it's just your thoughts. So I don't mess with the system willy-nilly, I guess I should say. Like, that is not my go-to, and empowering that system, I see that system as the system that did that to that community. I don't understand people who talk like that, who understand that, same feds that killed Martin Luther King, how we know that, and then we still go to them to solve our problems.
Right.
That's the part I don't understand. And I specifically don't understand who white people who talk about privilege all fucking day, but use it as something to just diminish the experience of white individuals, call cops. You know what I mean? Who like cheer for January 6th people who are protesting. Once again, you don't have to agree with what they're protesting about. I don't understand how you then cheer for the same justice system to take them out. Because every time you as an individual go, yay, justice system, daddy, get my enemies, you are growing the egregore, the energetic thing that then uses that power to hurt the people you are alleging to care about. So
right.
that's the disconnect for me. And then when you say that, because people have allowed the Democrats to make themselves synonymous with equality when they're not, they aren't. You've allowed this group of power-hungry insider traders that are also racist. They're just pretending not to be racist. You allow them to go, well, we are the ones who are on the side of the Black and brown people, and there's no proof of that. I mean, where did the crime bill come from? I mean, like, come on now. It's not real. It's not true. And so then when people stand up and go, no, it's the system is rotten, and you go, well, that's a privileged take. You make my head fucking spin with that. So someone else asked a question. Well, I woke right up. I guess we should have started with this. Someone else also asked a very specific scenario. I'm not going to read it because my reading sucks. But if a man, I believe it said if a drugged out man was I got to be careful, was committing violence against a woman in a park and there were kids in the car and the kids were presumably next, you wouldn't call the cops, was the question. And so I guess to clarify, I'm not saying there's not a scenario in which I wouldn't call the cops, because I can't make absolute statements like that. I could be caught in a scenario that activates my fight or flight. I was racking my brain about it. I think if I was like alone in the house with just the kids and someone had definitely broken into the house and Mark wasn't here, I would probably hide in a closet and call the cop because we don't know anyone here. Like when I lived in Delaware, I would call a neighbor, but like we don't really know anyone here. So like, sure. But like I'm running the risk of being the one getting shot if I do that. Like, so I'm not saying there's not a scenario in which I wouldn't call the cop. Now, if I got attacked and the person ran away, I would not call the cops. Like, I would not pursue. I don't believe in punishment, even really. Like, truly, my true moral code is I don't believe that punishment. I believe that the universe has natural consequences. So there are all kinds of complicated things in here. We are in a very sick society. We have created this society in which people are like, it would take my ideologies cannot meet the reality of the moment that we live in. And I understand that. Like, while I am anti-cop, I understand you can't just get rid of cops tomorrow. Right. Like, we need to talk about the entirety of the system. And I believe that we will see a world that lives close to my ideologies, and we are probably going to get there through something like so many natural disasters. There's not a system left, probably something like that. So I am not insane. I think in that scenario, if it's me and the kids in the closet, I need to scare the person out of the house. Like, yeah, there's a chance I will call the cops. I wouldn't press charges. I wouldn't like pursue. I just don't see cops as the authority or the daddy. I believe, you can look into the origin of the police and that'll tell you everything you need to know about what they are. They're here to protect, not you. And so I also don't believe that every cop is bad. I think the system sucks. I think the system is bad. And so in that scenario, that very specific scenario that person ran off, what drugs are we talking about? Bath salts? Does he have a gun? Was this before or after I sat around sedentary for the last 4 years? Because previous to like Lyme disease, I would have choked a guy out. Like, I would have slipped up behind him and put him to sleep, probably. And then we would have figured it out from there. I'm a little less, my mobility is not what it used to be. So I feel more confident in my ability to diffuse a situation with someone on drugs than cops. But this also just like, where? Are we talking, what park? Is it 2:00 in the morning? Are we talking about broad daylight? Then yeah, civilians would stop him.
That's what it's like. This is such a nuanced thing. Like the take you have is I agree with it. But then when someone brings an example forth where, again, it's going to be nuanced. It's like this thing is situational. It's like the thing you're putting out there is an ideal to adhere to, but like situationally it's going to change, That's the problem with a lot of these conversations. Everything's so nuanced, but everybody tries to present it as like hard facts. Well, okay, so you're against the cops. What about this situation? It's like, yeah, I'm not an idiot, but overall, I'm not going to trust the authorities with most situations,
Yeah, and I mean, and I think also, like, I think that people are largely high on propaganda, especially people who've just never seen some shit, are like high on some propaganda from like Law and Order or whatever, where it's cops often show up and shoot the wrong person. Like, many of them have raging PTSD, blown out nervous systems. Many of them got into a position of authority because they have a distorted relationship with authority. A metric fuck ton of them have racial prejudice, And so, I mean, how many videos on the internet do you have to see of cops showing up and making things way worse? They are not trained in dealing with people with mental illness. They are not trained in dealing with people with autism. And they often show up, and because they have blown out nervous systems, they end up shooting the person that called them. And so it would really depend on the individual moment. But my first instinct I'm obviously not going to leave and let the guy beat the woman. Also, I don't know if you've ever been a woman getting beaten by a man in a park. I actually have had that life experience more than once. Does the cop on the corner, or like, are you talking about calling the cop? You have to wait for them to show up. So no, that's not my go-to. It's absolutely not my go-to ever. It's not the first thing I think of ever. In most circumstances, I trust civilians to handle circumstances. I do not see them as like saviors or fixing things. And it just really kind of depends. And like I said, it's not because I think the individuals are bad, because we are all conditioned into this thing. But in my experience, they often bring violence into more violence into circumstances, and you never know which one you're going to get, I had it's not a really intense story, but I remember I was like probably 22 or something, and I had come back to my hometown, Orlando,
around Christmas, and me and a couple of friends wanted to go skateboard at night. And one of my friends knew of a skate park that had like a fence around it, and it was closed at night. But he was like, the fence is so small, we could just get in there and just have the whole park to ourselves at night. This would be so fun. So we went and did it, just jumped the fence. We're skating around, and a car went by, and we like ducked. The car came back by and I guess saw one of us. And then we realized it's a cop, and he turns his lights on, comes up to the gate, and we're both like, oh, I guess we got caught. Like, let's just get up and we'll leave, you know. We start walking towards the fence. He gets out of his car, gun drawn, and is screaming at us, get on the ground, get on the ground. Like, with so much, it's like he's in Nam. I mean, it's like, we're just young kids skateboarding in this park.
Like blonde hair, right? You're like peak blonde hair at this point.
Just little hipster kids, like, you know, and not, I mean, doing nothing. Like, we weren't vandalizing, we were just skateboarding. And so I'm kind of like laughing as this happened. I'm like, whoa, really, dude? I was like, we're just skating. I like said to him, he's like, get on the ground. So I was like, okay, I throw my board and I like get on the ground. And then he continues talking to us while we're on the other side of the fence. And finally we have to get up and climb over the fence. And he was so mean to us. He was like, I could take you in right now. You could be in jail. You're going to, all these threats. And I kept going like, hey, we're just skateboarding, dude. Like, sorry, we'll leave. Like, doing whatever I could to de-escalate it. And, you know, luckily nothing happened. I mean, I think in that situation, because we were young, blonde, white kids, there wasn't much that it didn't get intense. But I couldn't believe the intensity of which that guy showed up with. Yeah. That was so unnecessary, didn't help anything. It just escalated it to the point where if I really, you know, wasn't thinking it was ridiculous and going to be complacent with it, I tried to run or something, like something very bad would have happened in a very mundane, innocent situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a video circulating right now of a man whose hat flew off on the freeway. So he ran to get his hat, and the woman, maybe she had a flat tire and then his hat flew off. Or she was taking him to the hospital and his hat flew off or something. And he comes walking up. The cop gets out of the car. She just pulled over on the side of the freeway. The cop gets out of the car. And then the man comes walking up and the cop goes, are you helping her? And he goes, no, she's taking me to the hospital. And the cop shoots him. This happens. You haven't seen that video? It's horrific. It happens all the time. And to be honest, like when I was reading this comment about the cops and the kids, I don't want this podcast to become like massive trauma bombs, you know, but it's hard for me because my life is comfortable and sweet and soft now. And I can talk about, nervous system regulation and stuff, but that's not like the majority of my life was. That's the first 30 years of my life was. And I have seen the really dark side of these systems. And so I guess I'm just going to say fast forward a few minutes if you don't want to hear like a horrific story. But I just like, maybe I'll edit this out after. But the story, the like hypothetical scenario of if there was an addict, I thought it was interesting that you said someone on drugs, like in that comment was interesting. Being violent with his girlfriend. And then the kids, right? So the assumption here in the fantasy head, right, of someone who's maybe not actually interacted with the system is the cops would show up, they would save the woman, and then the kids would be taken to somewhere safety, like whatever. That's not my experience with the system. That's not most people I know who have been in the system experience with the system. And this is not to say that there are not well-meaning individuals. I know well-meaning social workers. I'm related to some of them. They will tell you they hate the system. I know well-meaning foster parents. They will tell you they hate the system. I had a friend who was a young mom. Oh, God, this story is so fucking dark. I can't actually, I don't think I tell it, and I can't even ask her permission because she died last year. I actually would probably want the story told, actually. But She was a young mom, and she was in a domestic violence situation. And the cop showed up. And the person who was doing the domestic violence lied about who he was. And for whatever reason, these cops were oriented towards not liking women. That's the thing with the justice system, is that there are no checks and balances for prejudice.
You never know what you're going to get.
You never know what you're going to get. And you don't know what you're going to get with a jury. And, so you have racists, you have sexists, you have homophobic people. You have all of these things that everyone's so concerned about, allegedly, are what the system is founded on. Everything is subjective in the justice system. It's about who can sling the most mud. It's built to help narcissists. It's about who has the most money. Even divorce court is about who has the best fucking narrative, And then if you get a judge on a bad day, or you get a judge who has racial prejudice or is homophobic or any of these things, like, you're going to get something different than someone else. Like, the entire thing does not address prejudice, any kind of prejudice. So for whatever reason, the cops didn't like her. They listened to him. They let him go. They took her kids. She then was, so then she was like in the system. Her adopted parents actually had money, but they were trying to teach her a lesson. This is the 90s. So trying to teach her a lesson about being with this guy. So they were like trying to do tough love shit because it was the fucking 90s. And she very quickly lost full custody of her kids. She was a teenager. She could not like get her shit together when she was in court. Like, she would freak out, and they weaponize that, right? So they weaponize emotions and as you're hysterical or whatever. And so, long story short, her children were taken away and were given to someone who sexually assaulted them on the internet for the next 12 years. And the feds were actually the ones who ended up catching them, and then it was in the news. And so my friend, who had spent her entire life grieving the loss of her children, then had to watch that they were horrifically tortured by people who were being paid by the state to take care of the kids. I would love to tell you that that's the only story like that I know, but it's not. And I just like when I talk about the things that I talk about, like, I'm holding a million dark fucking stories because I spent most of my life in that side of the world. And I am trying not to be like a trauma bomber. So a lot of times I make statements about things and then I don't show the work. I was taken out of my mom's custody when I was 15. I was put into CPS custody. I never should have been put in CPS custody. I had another parent across the country functioning. He was never even contacted and told that I was taken out of her custody. She didn't even actually legally have custody of me. My dad had custody of me. I was then put into group homes that were abusive. I was put into foster care homes with dads that were trying to fuck me. So I have massive issues with the entirety of the system. I don't automatically equate cops showing up with saving kids. So that's my perspective. So no, in that scenario, no. I wouldn't walk away and let that woman get hurt. But in that scenario, I don't automatically think the system getting involved is what benefits the children. Yeah. And that's not to say that's everyone's experience with CPS. And I certainly don't feel that way. Same thing, I don't like the education system, but I don't project that onto teachers. They are working for a system, like, they're doing their best. So no, it's not. There probably is scenarios in which I would call the police where there just isn't like physically anything else I can do. But I do not see the justice system as anything other than like wholly corrupt, and the way that the system is set up. And so I don't cheer when it's pretending to go after billionaires. I see that as a trick to get us to call it daddy. Going back to do you have any thoughts about any of that?
No, I think I agree with all of it. I don't know if this is because we have the internet now and we're connected and we can see everybody's daily lives, but it's really awesome to see online civilian, people taking problems into their own hands and helping innocent people. In that scenario, a bystander walks by and he happens to be a military dude or somebody that's like fit and capable, and de-escalates the situation and takes it into their own hands. I mean, we have all these like group of, I don't know what you would call them, if they're like civilian police or something, but
like
they're
vigilantes.
Yeah, but they're going after pedophiles, and taking it all into their own hands. They're not using the authorities at all, but they're tracking these people down, confronting them in public, and then I think eventually kind of trying to capture them and take them to the authorities. But doing so much work yourselves by skirting the system and really like showing up almost just like Jedis, like just figuring it out. And I think I trust that a lot. Like I do trust that a lot of people, most people have good intentions. A lot of us are conditioned and kind of sick and turned upside down and traumatized. But in many scenarios, like when you're faced with just like a very quick decision, seeing more and more people just take it into their own hands and solve it together instead of standing by and calling the number and waiting and not knowing what to do,
Right.
And I think that's like, it's inspiring to see those stories online. And I think that is something that we could be leaning on a lot more than so quickly trying to take it to the official justice system, But I think a lot of people are afraid to do that because it feels not official. Like you have to get the officials involved on this so they can actually provide justice to it, when there's a lot more that I think we could be doing on our own,
Yeah, and it's just like the system is like set up around like property and like,
there's so many weird regulations and rules to it too.
Yeah, yeah. There's a fantasy of what the system is, and then there's the reality of what the system is. And I think that a lot of people operate within the fantasy of what the system is. And then when they get caught up with the system for some reason, or they try to get justice for something, they always think they're the first person having the experience where the system doesn't give a shit, or they go to court for something and they realize that who wins in court is literally the best mudslinger. It's not actually.
That's what was...
When people go, that's a convicted felon, I'm like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I couldn't even believe it was just the innocent thing of doing a divorce, like going to divorce court, how much of a game and weird, like who has the best narrative, who has the most mud to sling. When we were going into that whole process, without saying too much information, I mean, the discovery process where you have to like input all your evidence, I was very like thin with it in the beginning, because I was like, I'm not trying to like destroy someone's character. But then when I saw the other side's discovery coming in and then talking to my lawyer, I was like, we need more, like, you got to find something. I was like, oh, because I have to come up with like, I have to kind of create this like false narrative that this person's really bad so I can get my rights, or I can get what I need, or I don't have to pay my, like,
yeah, why can't I just say we don't vibe?
We don't vibe anymore. And like, I'm not a bad person. She's not a bad person. I'd like equal rights with my kid, and like, I will pay whatever's fair. I'm going to do child support. I'm going to do all the, I'm not trying to pull one over anybody, but you can tell the whole system is like, that's normalized. It was just like, oh no, your emotions and feelings, just put all of that aside. Here's the game we're playing. Like, destroy the other person and provide evidence, and like, you'll come out on top. I was like, I'm not wanting to do that, actually.
Yeah, and there's like so many people in the community. We're actually going to do an episode on the Patreon with someone, with a friend of the podcast this month or next month. Like, the court system, like divorce court or like custody or whatever, is a great place for like narcissistic people, or like emotionally unhealthy, whatever you want to call it, psychopaths, to like continue to punish their former victim, because it's perfect. It's the perfect place for that. And so there's all these moms in the group who are just like trying to survive, and they're just being raked over the coals over and over again by their toxic ex, because the court system's like, oh, you want to blow through tens of thousands of dollars just talking shit about your ex? This is the perfect environment for that. And it's all just, it's so gross. It's so gross. So no, for me, as a justice system is a lot more like, I think that people focus a lot on cops. And then obviously, the violence with the cops, the prejudice with the cops is an issue. I used to, when I encountered them a lot, like we encountered them a lot when I was on drugs. And then they were around quite a bit when I was young as well, because my mom was on drugs. But, and when you're poor, they're everywhere. You know what I mean? When you're poor, your car's registration's not done. Like you get pulled over all the fucking time. Like I used to I didn't have as many categories of reason as I do now. I didn't have as many, I didn't have as much nuance as I'm capable of now. And so I was always just like, these are just like power hungry people that got bullied in high school that now have found a way to get their power back by fucking harassing me, as a teenage mom, just trying to struggle to make things work. And you're giving me a ticket because my trunk is bungee corded shut. I'm just poor, Now I understand nervous systems and I'm like, oh, you're probably a lot of those things, but also, or you have a savior complex. I think a lot of them get into it because they want to be a hero. They do want to do good, but it's also kind of through that shadowy thing. Or they do want to do good and then, it's the same thing. There's a peer pressure in that. And now you have to keep secrets of other people not being good. But the nervous system lens has explained so much. Like that person's blown out nervous system is why he showed up to some kids skateboarding.
Yeah, and it was so clear. I didn't even have the categories of reason at the time, but I was like, oh, there's something wrong with you. Like you got some issues. Because there's nothing going on here, bro. You're either like in a precinct that's very boring and this is like a huge event for you. So you're finding some meaning in your dumb job, or you're going through a divorce. Something else is going on. It has nothing to do with us. But yet you're the one who technically in my life's kind of in your hands right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at if you're just someone who doesn't equate the justice system as helpful, and I'm sure I've talked about this before, but when I did come forward to talk about the fact that I was getting abused by my friend's dad, I first told a teacher who then just had me keep telling her about it for a year, well into me being, I was in 4th grade when I told her, into me being in 5th grade. That is where the social status, I think, played a role. I don't think I was believed. He was very well put together. We were not. And then when I told my mom said, well, we can't call the cops because I sell drugs and he knows that. So he'll just, I'll end up in jail or something. They're not going to do anything. And I remember being 9 and understanding that. I already understood enough about the system and the way that the cops behaved when we were around and stuff to understand, that's not going to be fun for me and it's not going to be fun for anybody. And then later, my dad took me to the cops and had me do a statement and stuff. And then they were like, I don't know, man, not much we can do. So I just I'm sure they've been called for things. I have memories of them being called and then just laughing at how long it took them to get there. My car someone walked into my apartment in 2018, took my purse, went downstairs, beeped my car, stole my car. I had to call the cops because I have renter's insurance and car insurance. You have to have a police statement. But I was pretty this is a technicality. I know you're not going to go for me, it's because I come from that. I was like, oh, they caught me slipping, So I just put an electronic lock on the door so that the fucking door is not open. And then was I'm not I don't want justice or whatever. They're probably drug addicts or something. Whatever. I should have kept my door locked. And I was so not feddy, I guess, when the cops were there, that then they started questioning me as if I had stolen my own car. They were like, do you have any proof that the car payments are up to date? And I'm like, oh God, shut up. I just don't care. You're not going to go fucking look for my car. This isn't Law and Order. I know that this is just going to get put in a list of things. And they did casually come across it after it had been stripped later. But so, I just know the system my brain doesn't work like that at all. So that would be that would not be the last thing I would think. Now, if the woman was dead, then so I'll call the cops because they're good at that. Handled the emergency that has happened here for sure. But I do not automatically assume that a cop's coming into a high tense scenario like that would not probably just bring more chaos.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on the situation. But I think I never even got to the original points of that comment because I just kind of went on a different tangent. When I said that, because the thing here was you did a lot of drugs when it was illegal and you never suffered punishment. So that's not what I said. What I said is, if the government says you can't get abortions and 80% of the country, I'll just say it clearer, 80% of the country wants abortions, 80% of the country can just decide to do something different the way that addicts have decided to do something different. That doesn't mean you won't get punished if you get caught. I know, whatever. 80% of the country is a lot of fucking people. If that group of people decided that the government's just not going to make decisions for their bodies, the government just really wouldn't be able to enforce that. So that's what I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to say I never suffered punishment, because I did eventually catch charges. I would have if I would have not gotten clean when I got clean, like started to get in trouble because it had begun and I was at the beginning of my Saturn return. So yeah, I just isn't what I meant by that. I meant if the government is overstepping huge quantities of people, if those huge quantities of people could find a way to find solidarity with each other versus the system, which means forfeiting the opportunity to cheer for the system when it's going after your perceived enemies, which they're only really your enemies because the government told you they're your enemies, then you would be able to live outside of the system that is hurting everyone. That would require people coming together, which it would be like a positive tribal community thing.
Scary though.
And then, as much as you may think our reality is created by our individual minds, spirits, wills, we need a majority to believe in a thing for it to actually manifest. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I see what you're saying. But that is very cross of planning. Like, everyone was existing in the same game in the cross of planning. So whatever the majority believed is what manifested. We are actually splitting off from that. And so this is why, once again, everyone could benefit so much from opening your mind and listening to people that you perceive to be bad and listening to where they're living, because people are really legitimately living in different worlds. And those worlds are actually not determined by gender, sexuality, or race, as you would be led to believe. So how do we do that without tribalism? Okay, so tribalism is when the group makes the rules and the group governs and the individuals are expected to operate within the rules made by the group. Individuality says that the individual governs themselves and they make their own decisions for themselves. And then individuals may come together in groups of like-minded folks and enact change. Tribalism says if you step out of the line, you're going to be punished. So an example of this is, while I do believe myself to be pretty far left, there are aspects of the quote-unquote left that I don't agree with. I don't agree with public shaming. I don't agree with labeling people as whatever you decide to label them with because they have a question, or because I don't believe in making people toe a party line. I don't believe in the cult behavior. I don't believe in the moral grandstanding or whatever. And then I don't believe with several things that the left has like recently changed into. So I don't believe in censorship. And I think that it's an individual's responsibility to engage with material. I don't believe that anyone should be deciding what is misinformation or disinformation. That has weirdly become a left thing. I don't agree with that fucking at all. I don't agree with, like a lot of the hypocrisy. So I don't like it. I really don't resonate with politics at all, but there is a lot of like, if my genuine question is like, when you're mad at something Trump did, you ask yourself, would you care if Biden did it? And vice versa on both sides. So I don't perfectly fit in, there are other topics I'm not going to get into because I am tired, but I don't perfectly fit in that container. You know, I definitely don't fit in the other side's container, but I don't perfectly fit in that container. nor do I want to identify as that. That's why I don't talk about it a lot, is because I don't want to be a part of, I don't want to be, my rules are my own. They just happen to fit kind of over there. You're not going to tell me the group. You're not going to tell me what to do. And now that I've worked through the nervous system work, like if you want to kick me out of that group, I don't give a shit, because I'm not trying to be a part of your group. Tribalism is like, we decide how you're supposed to show up, what is moral, what is attractive, what is whatever. And if you don't do it, then you're bad and you're kicked out. That's tribalism. Yeah, you can do, yeah, it actually is deeply cannibalistic. And I think we're being shown that, like, these groups get together and they want to affect change, and then all they do is recreate this exact same dynamic over and over again. So, individuals do create their individual reality 100%. There are tons of people that, fit in the categories that you're, saying, and they don't identify as oppressed, and they live a life outside of the government's whatever, and it doesn't affect them. There are lots of people that are doing that. That's because they're individuals living in their individual reality and choosing not to engage with that. And so, if you want to enact change on a large scale, I don't even resonate with that. I don't resonate with the idea of the United States of America, if I'm being honest. I think that you can't get that many people on the same page. I think that we have a way too... we think way too many things are a conversation for everyone to be having. I think sexuality is a personal thing. It should not be legislated in any way, shape, or form. I think every single decision you make for your body is yours to make. It's not anyone else's conversation to have, and it shouldn't be legislated in any way, shape, or form. I think the only reason that big groups of people should come together is to figure out really basic infrastructure, and that's about it. I think social issues should be completely non-legislated whatsoever. So yeah, I don't subscribe to the idea of the government even at all, because I like most of these conversations. I'm like, why are people that aren't trans discussing laws about trans people? Why are people who why are we talking about whether or not other people should be forced to get a medical treatment they don't want to get? Why is someone who's not the one getting the abortion talking about the abortion? My brain does not work like that at all. Oh, and there is no it doesn't matter if I agree with it or I think you should or shouldn't. It doesn't matter. It's not my body. So why am I in this fucking conversation? Why is the government in this fucking conversation? That's how my brain works. So
are you running for president?
I don't believe in the institution of the United States, so that would make it pretty tough. But
so that person's question was, how does they were stating that we all have to be on the same page collectively for things to manifest collectively.
Yes.
And so how does that work on an
we
individual?
need to be here's the thing. And this is just going to be the nature of this podcast, because we're very much on the same page, and any work that I do moving forward. We're moving out of a tribal age, and many people still look at things tribally and collectively, and we're moving into an individual age, which, unless you're wired that way, it's going to be completely foreign to you. And I'll say this every single episode if I have to. And so I have a renewed sense of purpose in that I am going to talk about an individual perspective, because that's just kind of where I believe the energy is going. You can resist it all you want. That's fine. You can probably create a pocket where it exists, but we're seeing the evidence of the collapse of tribalism and collectivism working. It's just not working. You can't get it to work. Why? Because everybody's spinning off into their own direction. And so what I am interested in talking about and excited, and we are both very into this, is imagining a world that is oriented around self-governance, self-sufficiency, and the individuals as nuanced, complicated, contradictory individuals, and not lumped together and painted with broad brushes. So, yeah, everything I'm going to say is going to contradict that way of being. Not because I think it's bad. I don't think the cross-planing was bad. It just already happened. It's over. And the wheels are falling off of it, is I think part of the reason I feel so comfortable talking about this now is because it's pretty obvious you're not putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. So let's start to talk about what it could look like in a different way. And human design gives a fucking left-brained framework to that, which is like kind of the foundation of this podcast. So yeah, the question is like, sure, individuals create their reality, but how are we supposed to enact change without tribalism? And my answer to that is you don't. You don't change things en masse. You don't.
I would say maybe that would happen as an effect of individuals changing their own reality and taking control, that then those collective control mechanisms no longer work, and what takes place of it as far as like community driven change is much more of a kind of natural phenomenon, just like occurs, but it's not this management issue anymore.
Yeah, you never were doing top down,
right?
Like you never were, the voting is giving you there was always an illusion. That was always propaganda. But like, yeah, if you don't like the laws of the United States, then it's time to start thinking about something else. I mean, the United States of America was like kind of built on, treachery and breaking of treaties and everything else. It's like I don't think it's ever been moral. And I don't think it's really ever been concerned with the experience of the individuals within it. And so start imagining something different, start talking about something different, and then take your own power back and start building something different. I don't know, it's my perspective. I don't know if any of that made sense.
Amen. Amen.
I have like other things in the notes about like other ways in which science is starting to prove spirituality and stuff, but I feel like those could be their own episode.
Yeah.
Okay. Does this episode suck?
I don't know.
Me either. I never really know. All right. Well, love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.